So this is a first. The folks at KeepHifi sent me a couple of IEMs from a new company called CCZ to check out. The Flagship Plume and the budget Coffee Bean. And after like a week of their arrival to the studio, I started testing them, starting with the Flagship Plume, obviously, because why not? And as I was sitting down to write my notes for the review, I was greeted with the information that CCZ has already discontinued it. And I did think of going on with a separate video for each of these IEMs, but then I decided to, bring them together and make one video using the Plume and everything that I've learned about it as a way to understand what we should or maybe could expect from CCZ as a brand in terms of house sound, target curve, and how much they would be able to actually bring all of that down to the realm of budget options using the Coffee Bean as our first example. Sounds fair? All right, let's get to it. Okay, so I'm not gonna get into any big discussions about, everything that's happened and the discontinuance of the Plume, but if you guys wanna know more and read the official statement, I'm gonna leave a link to it down below. But suffice it to say that the Plume has always been, like, the aim of the company for it, has always been to make it a statement piece. And let me tell you guys, for someone trying to make an impact, CCZ did go all out with the Plume. And being a flagship, it also had the price tag to go with. Almost. Being launched at close to $250, while the Coffee Bean being only about $20. I've seen it for close to $15, $14 actually. Now, the box of the Plume doesn't really bring a design language that speaks to me personally, but at least it does seem consistent with both the tone and the naming of the IEM, and when you get into it, when you get it open, now we're talking. It's a beautiful display of the different tips that come with the IEM, all of them silicone, different colors, thicknesses, and presumably sound profiles as well, and right above are the IEMs themselves, and they look honestly really premium. Bright gold with a texture that imitates sort of a grate and with the CCZ brand sort of engraved, this build looks super luxurious. And under that layer of the box, you get a case that's, I don't know if this is real leather or fake leather, but it's a really nice case, very pocketable, the cable and adapters for both 4.4mm balanced and 3.5mm. Because the cable that comes with the Plume out of the box terminates in a 2.5mm Pentacon balanced connection. These things were not joking around. And despite the cable being a tad thick and unwieldy and not completely safe from kinks or tangles, it is really comfortable, excellently built, it's super quality, and I think it both looks awesome on its own and complements perfectly the gold tone set by the IEMs. The only other IEM package experience that I've ever seen that came close to being kind of like this, but actually not as good, was with the Empire Zeus, like years back. And back then it was like 4 times the price of the Plumes. Anyway, the actual monitors are thick, heavy, and big, which is probably mandatory to fit the single dual magnet drivers plus 2 BAs that are exclusively for the treble, and another set of 2 BAs exclusive for the mids and mid-highs. And that big design can look and feel exceptionally well made with fantastic fit, which is precisely what happens to my right ear. But it also can feel and be way too big, unwieldy, and definitely not comfortable, which is exactly what happens to my left. Yay, lucky me. And since there's nothing modular or malleable about the design, you have no rubber fins or rubber anywhere, what you see is what you get. And I mean, changing tips can definitely help with the comfort within the ear canal and help with the seal, but the overall fit of these IEMs either work or don't for you, and being this big, I have a feeling that a bunch of people are not really going to like them that much in this sense. Now, by contrast, the Coffee Bean comes in a plain Jane looking box, nothing fancy in terms of accessories or other amenities, it's just the IEMs, a simple, not that good cable that's not really that comfortable, a set of tips, and we're off to the races. The IEMs do look rather different from what we usually see around the $20 range, with their very own flexible silicone fin design to help accommodate the IEMs to your ears, even though they are already considerably smaller and lighter and easier to set and forget when compared to the Plumes, which happens because they bring down to earth the situation with the drivers using only a single dynamic, so not at all surprising that they are this much smaller. And in terms of visual cues from the bigger bro, at least it's not all gone. It might not have a body made of gold and use chainmail, but there is at least a golden-ish griddle that, cosmetically at least, gives it sort of a semi-open vibe sort of design. And it's super clear where CCZ's visual identity kind of falls here, because these are both wildly different visually from one another, but when you put them side by side, you do get sort of a sibling kind of vibe, which is reinforced by the fact that both of them are really very easy to drive, which is not at all what I expected from the Plume with its 5 different drivers. But being easy to drive and not really needing anything super special or fancy to push them doesn't actually translate into them being super easygoing in terms of sound. Because in all fairness, the Plume is easy to drive, but it's a fairly picky IEM, and depending on the sourcing and amplification you're using, it does change its sound signature quite a bit. From everything that I have used to test them, it sounds at its best while plugged either directly to my phone through a cacophony of adapters and dongles, or to my IE Magni while being pushed specifically in negative gain. Everything else didn't necessarily sound bad, but it did lose a little bit of its stage, or more commonly actually, the sub bass did bleed out into the rest of the mix, making you kind of lose a little bit of the overall detail. And in terms of sound signature, the Plume isn't necessarily an IEM that I would say is made for bass heads, the same way like an old school pair of Beats would have been, but the low end is definitely the star of the show here. This is the main attraction. But this warmer, punchy low end isn't exactly speedy, which is not something I usually nitpick about, but at the $200+ range, I'm gonna. By contrast, the 4 balanced armatures do a fantastic job delivering fast, punchy mid-range and treble, even with the mid-range being a little bit, more recessed and the treble being slightly rolled off. All in all, the Plume is a bright, fairly smooth and sweet sounding IEM that's not uninteresting or pathetic at all, and is actually kind of intense in its presence. Imaging is just alright, especially for the money. Stage is quite wide, but again, depending on how you're actually pushing and sourcing them. But both separation and detail extraction are where the Plume kind of falls a bit short, even when properly sourced. So TLDR is more melodic stuff that's more intimate in terms of vocals and could benefit from a more well-executed separation and detail extraction. Those things are not the Plume's jam. If it benefits from low end, that's where it shines. And the Coffee Bean, well, it's more of a more controlled and more relaxed version of the KS1, but with a bit of an intimate stage, more intimate stage, I would say. So it's V-shaped, good amount of bass, the highs are fairly detailed, the mids are a little bit recessed, so again, nothing super special for vocals, but it's not as aggressive or bright as the KS1 was, with more overall definition. And it's also not as grainy as the KS1 was, and the imaging, even though it's not the greatest thing ever, at least it doesn't fluctuate as much between it's alright and it's a complete mess. Oh, and instrument separation is just as basic. So TLDR is the Coffee Bean is basically a more relaxed and more controlled with less soundstage version of the KS1, or it is a Plume with less stage and not as picky about its sources. Which, I mean, considering CCZ's plan with the Plume, being able to do something on a budget that basically sounds like the more fancy version, but, less expensive, it's totally mission accomplished in my books. But I didn't let the KS1 just skate out of here unharmed, and it wouldn't necessarily be fair for me not to at least point this out to CCZ as well. So, guys, I do understand that the Coffee Bean is a budget IEM, but this sub $30 club has been seeing a huge amount of new stuff coming out with better overall packaged experiences, better builds, or even better sound than what the Coffee Bean is at least packing right now. So the competition is already super steep, and it's only gonna get worse. So you guys really need to take a step back and reevaluate. You need to at least consider how can you maybe deliver or, arrive to a better, more balanced package to get the coffee bean and perhaps your other IEMs as well into the market without it being pushed around and strangled too much from every direction by everything else that's already out there. And don't get me wrong, the coffee bean is absolutely worth its asking price. And if the Plume was still available, was still around, it would also be worth it. I mean, it was obviously going to be a tougher sell because over 200 bucks for the IEM, but it would still ultimately be the sort of product that leaves you with a great impression and sort of creates that anticipation for you to, see what else the brand can come up with next, which is incidentally where I'm left, because now I definitely need to at least try and check out the other two IEMs from CCZ, the Melody and Emerald, if I'm not mistaken. But those are gonna be for next time. And that's been it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks a lot for watching. This is Gus, and I'll catch you guys later.